Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us here at the Hagaman Memorial Library. I'm Cynthia Wazda. I'm the Community Services Librarian. I'd like to welcome you this evening in honor of National Mental Health Awareness Month. We have peer support specialist Stephen and author Stephen Cuddy with us this evening. His recent book, Learn to Manage Depression with Health Rocks, was recently published this year, and he will be, or in 2021, excuse me. And so he's going to talk to us about his book. And so without further ado, I will turn it over to Stephen. And thank you again for joining us, and welcome Stephen Cuddy. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you for having me here. Really glad to be. I actually grew up in East Haven. I spent most of my life in Foxton, the opposite end of town. Well, actually up until my 18th birthday when I went away to college, so I'm very familiar with the whole area. I have a long history and tradition of growing up in East Haven and coming back to East Haven to be engaged in different things that are going on in town here. My dad served on the Board of Education back in the 1970s in East Haven, so we have quite a history in town here. So I'm really glad to be at the Hagaman Memorial Library in East Haven.
And we're excited to have you.
Thank you. That's nice. So my book, Learn to Manage Depression Using Health Rocks, took me 10 years to write and publish, and there's a whole story behind that. Whenever you're writing a book or doing any difficult project, you're going to encounter periods of time when you just make no progress or you actually go backwards. In this case, there were stretches of time when I put the book down and I didn't do anything with it, and then I got some professional advice and other guidance that caused me to change the way the book was going to read. So it took me 10 years. I started it in 2009 and it was published in 2021. So it took a good 10 years to get the thing published. Early on, what I was trying to do for a lot of years, under the advice of a professional, somebody in the publishing industry, I was trying to get a book deal, and so I was just sticking with that, and that caused the book to delay getting published. However, it was good. It was a good sign and a good result, because the book is a much better book now than it could have been had I published it earlier, had I gotten a book deal. So by waiting, not by choice but by events, it ended up being the best book that I could publish on the topic. My background is I am a peer support specialist, which is somebody who deals with people on a peer-to-peer basis, somebody who has particular struggles, in this case mental health. I work directly with the person to develop recovery plans, just to talk about their life, and to try to see where the individual is trying to go and try to help them to get there. My other background is I have lived experience of mental health, mental illness for many years. I'm 61 years old today, and I started, my first symptoms of mental illness were in my early 20s. But then when I was 51 years old, I was undiagnosed from my early 20s to my mid 40s. And then I got my initial diagnosis of mental illness, generalized depression and anxiety, in my mid 40s. And then I got my final and correct diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder based upon developmental trauma. I was never in the armed services, but I have PTSD from my upbringing at the school. The schools I went to and at my home. I was like the last generation of people that were raised, or children, I should say, that were raised very, very strict rules by their parents and by some of the schools that they attended. So there was a lot of physical and emotional threats and abuse that would be considered abuse by today's standards. But I can say that everyone reacts to stimuli differently. My brother John was 2 years old. He's 2 years older than me, and he has really none of the symptoms that I have, or he doesn't have the illness, the PTSD illness that I have. I also have an addiction. I'm addicted to pornography from my early years also. That has not evolved into a sexual addiction, thank God, where I'm actually running around paying people for sex. The addiction and the mental illness work together to kind of, like, as two antagonists that I have to kind of deal with. I do have regrets from loss in my life, opportunities that if I had the confidence I have today, I would have taken advantage of things in my 20s and 30s that I did not. And so I have a real sense of loss that weighs on me, and it's just something I need to manage. Like many people have conditions and situations they have to manage. This is what I have, and I do have regret because of the losses in my life, but I don't wish I had I don't wish I had a different life. I'm kind of grateful overall that I got to where I am now, able to publish a book. I'm collaborating with institutions on the book. I have a workbook that is well along towards being published with the same editor and team that I used to publish my book. And the workbook is where you can do exercises in it to learn about yourself and learn about the concepts. Do I wish my life was different? In a sense, yeah. I mean, I wish I had the confidence in my 20s that I have now, because then I would have just been looking at opportunities and just taking advantage of a whole bunch of stuff. But I realized that life is lived in the present moment, and you can't go back and relive the past. So I do have a sense of desperation that I want to kind of like have a good life now and going forward, to make up for what I missed out on in the past. And I think it's completely fair for anyone to kind of view themselves and kind of reminisce and kind of do a personal assessment of where you are, how your life is, and are you happy with where you're going or not going. But then pull yourself back into the present moment, and because you can only live in the present moment, you can only make decisions in the present. You cannot make a decision about the past. You cannot make a decision about the future, really. You can only make a decision about the present moment. So this first slide that we have up is, it says in the upper left, empathy matters. Now, empathy matters. I work for Raytheon Technologies. I used to be, Pratt & Whitney, that merged with Raytheon Corporation. We have an individual at the company that started this group, grassroots group, called Empathy Matters. And this is a presentation that I did a few weeks ago for the Empathy Matters. They meet monthly, and people that are employees sign on, and there's usually a speaker, and then there's conversation around empathy. So this one, that's where this presentation came from. So I'm a 37-year Pratt & Whitney career in finance, and as I mentioned, I have lived experience with depression. I'm a peer support specialist. I'm a virtues expert. What does that mean? Well, a virtues expert is somebody I've trained through the schools I've gone through, and courses I've taken, and a lot of readings that I've done over my course of my life. I've learned a lot about virtues like humility, empathy, compassion, faith, hope, love, for example. And a lot of the book is based upon those and other virtues. So, and that's how I knew that for my own areas of expertise, that these virtues are a path towards a better mental health. And in a sense, they are paths towards what they call mindfulness, which is living in the present moment without judgment, objectively observing what naturally exists. So there are paths to mindfulness and there are blocks to mindfulness. The paths to mindfulness tend to be things that will help improve your mental health, and the blocks to mindfulness tend to hurt your mental health. and every virtue has a corresponding vice. For example, gratitude is the virtue and greed is the vice. If you can live a life that's more filled with gratitude rather than greed of what you're trying, greed is always like saying, well, why can't I get this next thing? I'm always trying to achieve something else. But then when you achieve that something else, then you look and say, now I want the next thing. A sense of greed, where gratitude would be, if you achieve something, then you actually look at what you've achieved and you say, you know what, I'm really grateful for that. And you can relive that gratitude day after day about that singular accomplishment. And then that puts you on a path where you can more ably be mindful, living in the present, rather than getting pulled back into the past and dwelling in the past, or being obsessed about an unknown future and spending a lot of your time in the future. Because staying in the present it's difficult to do. Like if the present has a lot of pain and suffering at times, it's easier to block that and not want to experience that. But what mindfulness says is it encourages you to experience your life as it is, at its face value, without judgment. But that arguably takes a lot of courage, right, at times. So the next slide here, what is a health rock? Because my book is called Learn to Manage Depression Using Health Rocks. Well, a health rock, examples, they're daily practices, things that you can learn and apply daily. Examples are gratitude and empathy. And the reason why you see on the slide gratitude and empathy are bold-faced is because in my book, everywhere a health rock appears, it is bold-faced to help it stand out. Qualities of a health rock. It is readily available. It can be accessed at any hour of the day or night. It permits vulnerability. You can be yourself and experience the full benefit of the health rock you have engaged. It allows you to feel you're a part of society, not isolated, not broken, not a failure. It serves as a guide to safe passage. You are more confident that you will have success in dealing with your current situation. It is reliable and dependable. You can count on it as you approach every kind of situation in your daily life. And it makes you feel like you're in charge of your life. When you fall down, you can pick yourself back up. So these are the qualities that I came up with for what a health rock is, or the qualities of a health rock. And the health rocks are meant to be expressions, not physical rocks. However, you may decide, like when you learn about the health rocks and what they are, you may really look at certain health rocks and feel strongly that you feel like you could connect with a health rock. Like one of the health rocks I connect with is courage, and others humility. And so my kids got me 2 rocks that actually say courage and humility, and I have those at my workstation, at my job. So it's fine to have physical rocks. If that helps you to understand and appreciate and learn and reinforce the concepts of what the health rock is, to make your life what you want it to be. Now the next slide, which is there's only 3 slides here on this presentation. Empathy as a health rock. So empathy, and I also categorize health rocks. I have health rocks that are placed in categories. There's virtues rocks, the I can do this rocks, the here and now rocks, the spiritual religious rocks, the commitment rocks, and there's some more categories. And then I put the health rocks in the category that they belong in to kind of make it a bit easier to learn them. So empathy is a health rock that is part of the helping other people rocks category that I placed it in. So empathy is a helping other people health rock. So for those that are live for the presentation and those who are going to see this in Facebook at a later time, there's an exercise in empathy that I did at my presentation at work that I say record in your own words what empathy means to you and why it is important. So what we did when we did this at work, people were online and they were writing in notes about what empathy means to them and why it is important. Because as I said earlier, empathy, we think it's so important at my company that we have a group that meets called Empathy Matters monthly and talks about empathy, which is an interesting idea. So what empathy means, like what does empathy mean to me? And why do I think it's important? Well, empathy is relating to somebody else's challenge or problem and then trying to do something about it. Compassion is when you feel emotions for somebody's challenge or problem, but then the compassion would sort of stop there. You wouldn't actually do anything. Empathy could be the same as compassion, or it could actually extend towards trying to help the person that's having the problem, trying to actually give them some tangible help, either advice or something more material that could help them. So why empathy isn't, what it means to me and why it's important to me is in the area of mental health, I feel that I've learned a lot from a lifetime of experience and study that's evidence-based, that I felt and still feel that I need to communicate to people. I need to get out to people and let them know that these concepts are real and that they could help them, and then to try to teach them about these concepts. So I feel that from a standpoint of empathy, which is actually a health rock, that empathy was one of the reasons that I ended up going through the very difficult path of publishing a book that I felt was worthy of the reader. Otherwise, I would not have published it if I felt that somehow it was just, or I would have, if it was just something I threw together that had some meaning, but I did not feel would be worthy to the reader, I would have published it, and then I would have put a copy in my nightstand by my bed, and then given a few away to friends and family, and that would have been it. But empathy has caused me to want to get these concepts out, communicate them, share them with people, let them determine how or if they can be helped by these concepts, which is also very importantly why I'm writing a workbook that really can bring these concepts to life for people. And my editor is she has a strong background in publishing and also in the teaching environment. So she was a perfect one to align with me on this. So so empathy, that's what it means to me, is really connecting with somebody in an area that I can do something about and I can help. So this is an area where I have a lot of expertise. I wish I did not have the expertise I have. I wish like I said earlier, in my 20s, I was confident. I did not have a mental illness. I did not have what was at that point developing into an addiction as well. I wish I did not have any of that. And I wish I had started having kids when I was 25 years old. I got married when I was 23 years old, and all of this. And by now I'd have grandkids, for my current age. I'm grateful for the life I have. And I really believe that the gratitude is deep in me. But because I did go through my experiences and I did have do all my studying and learn so many things, that now empathy is causing me it's really creating in me a strong drive and really a desperation to communicate what I know to people, to share what I know, and to try to help them get on the path that they want to get on. Empathy, one of the quotes from my book from Kelsey Clark, It says, depression is an unmistakably taxing illness that presents what may feel like an insurmountable difficulties. A new study found that a positive character trait, empathy, belies this mental illness. Those who were more susceptible to depression tended to also be more selfless and empathetic. So the idea is when you have depression symptoms or anxiety symptoms, or you're having other mental health types of challenges from other diagnoses, it's difficult to be empathetic because you're just surrounded by your own stuff. But when you can rise above the ashes of the depression or the anxiety, if it's a panic attack, for example, you tend, per research, you tend to be more empathetic because now you're kind of relating to other people, particularly, especially those that have the same challenges you have. But really, I think the empathy goes beyond that. I mean, I don't have a problem with alcoholism. But yet I can be very empathetic towards somebody who is an alcoholic, because I understand what struggle is and I can relate to it. And that's the last part of the slide. Yeah. So while experiencing depression, I am not empathetic, or at best I'm shallowly empathetic. However, depression itself builds empathy, and the reason why it builds is bold-faced is because building something is another health rock. However, depression itself builds empathy, which I can feel and act upon as I rise again from depression's grip. So the idea is empathy has the qualities that I mentioned, that are also in the book. These quotes are from the book itself. So, and the other aspect of qualities there's qualities of health rocks. It's in part 1, chapter 3. And there's also another feature, what attracts me to the health rocks. So I'm going to find that right now. So on page 13 of the book, it was the qualities of health rock that I mentioned in the slide. And on page 14, it says, what attracts me to the rocks is the result of the implementation of their attributes into my life as I try to deal with the everyday challenges of depression. So what are the attributes? What do the rocks possess, or what was the allure or the attraction to me of the health rocks? Well, it's a better way to treat my depression. It does not mean the health rocks are all things that are free, that are like, it could be things like nature, the other things I mentioned. It could also be a pet, which isn't always free. But it's not like medication is not a health rock. However, it does not mean you should not try or go on medication for mental illness. It does mean that you should take accountability, and you're going to have more likely have a better outcome from your managing your mental health if you take accountability and you learn coping skills and tools that you can apply. Then you feel like you're more in control of your life. If you're only on medication, that's the only thing you're doing, then you're completely relying on the doctor that's prescribing the medication. And if you don't feel well one day and you're depressed or anxious, then first thing you do is you call the doctor and say, change my medication. And even if he or she were to do that, it takes a while before the onset of the medication kicks in. It's not immediate, right? So, and it is a trial and error. But by no means am I saying do not take medication. I take 5 milligram daily antidepressant, so I take medication. But keeping in mind that I'm saying it's a better way to treat my depression. It's all natural. It's grassroots. It promotes self-intimacy. One of the things that I did, one of the reasons when I got diagnosed with depression, I had to determine whether I wanted to be cured of it or I wanted to gain recovery of my depression. And on the surface, you'd say, of course you do. But then I was thinking, I've known myself all these years and decades with depression. If I become, let's say, cured, I was afraid I wouldn't know who I was. But what I realized was intimacy, which is expressing and feeling your emotions at a deep level, with self-intimacy, or then from there being intimate with your feelings towards another person. It could be in an intimate relationship, or it could be a family member or a friend. So it doesn't have to be just one type of relationship. I realized that it was not possible for me to really express intimacy and experience intimacy if I was having ongoing depression. Because depression makes that for me impossible. So I realized that became a big incentive for me to feel better, to gain recovery of my mental illness and my addiction. So that was what attracted me to Health Rocks, is the promotion of self-intimacy. Another quality is improvement in the quality of my relationships, including the possibility of marriage. My second, which I did get I got remarried in 2015. So that was my miracle. Because what happens with depression, it's, for me, it's like I'm on a cliff, and then there's a canyon, and there's another cliff. I want to get to the cliff, but I don't have anywhere to get there. It might as well be Mars, because I can't get there. And so what happened was I felt that I would never be able to have a good intimate relationship again, including my relationship with my kids wasn't very good. And I was able to really, by using the concepts in the book, was able to get myself to the other side of the cliff, to where I wanted to be. And then another thing that attracted me, it's an alternative to prescription medication, but again, not mutually exclusive. You can do both, the concepts of the book and medicine. But importantly, it's an alternative to self-medication, because what happens is a lot of problems we have, we self-medicate. We take extra pills that make us feel good, or we drink, or we smoke pot that we don't need medically per se, but we just do it to try to tune out the things in our lives we don't want to be dealing with or addressing. So it's an alternative to self-medication by using the concepts in the book. So the next thing I wanted to touch on was in terms of getting diagnosed, initially getting diagnosed, my early 20s is when I first had symptoms of depression, and I was not diagnosed initially until my mid-40s, which was from early 20s to mid-40s, that's half my life. So I went, at the point I was 45 years old, I went half my life with symptoms of depression but not being diagnosed. So what helped me, and denial is one of the challenges of depression I talk about in the book. And what helped me to get past my denial was I was diagnosed with borderline diabetes in my mid-40s, and I knew that exercise could help treat diabetes. And then I also knew that exercise could help treat mental illness. So I was better able to accept the fact that I have a mental illness, because it was proven to me scientifically that I have diabetes, and I realized I had the chance of treating both medical conditions with the same regimen of exercise. That gave me the courage or the impetus to say, yep, okay, I can accept that I have a mental illness. Prior to that, I did not want to think I had a mental illness because I was afraid of prescription medication, and I did not want to go on it. So and then I also had enablers, people who were telling me prior to my mid-40s that what I was experiencing was normal, don't worry about it. And then they would mention other like an example of another person that they know, and they would tell me how that person lived and acted. and it was crazier than how I was living and acting. So it kind of put me back in my place of saying, okay, I'm fine. I don't have to worry about being diagnosed with any illness. But I also was sad because people then, I was thinking if other people felt the way I felt, then I was sad. I was sad for humanity, basically. And it makes me think of a quote in the book on Abraham Lincoln. In 1841, he was a partner in a law firm, and he wrote a letter to his law partner saying basically, I am so miserable, I cannot imagine that anyone else is as miserable as I am. It seems to me I must die or be better, for there is no other possibility. He was a manic depressive, of course, and went on to do wonderful things, partly with that driving him, the qualities from that illness. So that's some of the background. Now, getting a bit more into the book, just in terms of the layout, is the book is in two parts. Part one is called Description of the Health Rocks, and what it does is it discusses the health rocks, what they are. It provides, based upon my own experience and expertise, areas of expertise, and it also adds research from other experts who are both are alive today and who've lived in the past. So it basically teaches about the health rocks. My area, so that's part one of the book, Description of the Health Rocks, and it's broken down by the categories of health rocks. And my areas of expertise, I'll read it right from the back cover, the first paragraph. I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety in 2006, that's when I was around 45 years old, and with developmental trauma, a form of post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, in 2012. I learned a new way using timeless principles to manage my depression. My expertise lies in these areas: mindfulness, spiritual, religious principles and virtues, because I'm also a third order secular Franciscan, which is, this is the, I think it's a Greek letter. It's the tau that St. Francis of Assisi in the year 1210 established as the symbol of the Franciscan order, which is part of the Roman Catholic Church. And I'm a professed member of the third order of secular Franciscans. I have formal mental health training and practice that kind of alludes to what I mentioned about being a peer support specialist, and I have lived experience. And so I also have extensive training and practice in providing mental health support as a peer support specialist. So that kind of gets to why I'm an authority to write a book like this, and why I can come up with this description of health rocks and put it in part one. I can also say when I came up with the health rocks, there are actually 50 health rocks. That's a lot. They do relate to each other, particularly in a given chapter. So if you look at chapter 5 of part 1, where the virtues rocks, and the virtues rocks are specifically let's see. The virtues rocks are honesty, patience and tolerance, poverty meaning an emptying of yourself, not a material like a financial poverty, humility, courage, wisdom, faith, hope, and love. So those are what I'm calling virtues health rocks. And the idea is if you learn one virtues health rock, you're sort of starting to learn the others. They're not like you have to learn each one individually. So the health rocks are what I describe in part 1 of the book. Part 2 of the book, which is the more important part, is called How to Use the Health Rocks. So once you've learned the health rocks in part 1, you can apply the knowledge of the health rocks in your life. You can point them to some of the challenges of depression, which is discussed in part 2. One of the challenges of depression, which is also a challenge for somebody who does not have depression, is worry. Worry when we're focused on something that's really bothering us and it's hard for us to get off of that particular item, and we revisit it time and time again. And as we all know, worry is not constructive. It doesn't like problem solve. It just causes us to spin on a particular topic and pulls our focus off of where we would like it to be. And so an example would be how to address worry would be gratitude. You can learn and cultivate gratitude, and then you can point gratitude at the worry, which doesn't make the worry disappear like a magic wand. The gratitude's not a magic wand that you're waving across the worry and then you don't have worry anymore. But it does help you manage the worry in a way where you can put the worry in perspective, and you then therefore not have the worry control you, your thoughts and your actions. So that is that's just one example. So that's what part 2 of the book covers. It's how to use the health rocks, and then there's take action sections at the end of every or nearly every chapter. There's something called take action, which is you take what you've read and learned in the chapter, and then you apply what you've learned to the particular act by taking action. An example would be part 1, chapter 14 of the book is the external environment rocks, which is specifically external environment rocks are music, nature, massage, pets, and exercise. So you could actually, once you learn about what some of those health rocks are, then the take action section, which I'll read from that chapter, again, in part 1 of the book, when you're learning about the health rocks, before you're actually applying them to your daily challenges in part 2. So the take action section is, your world expands by simply spending time in the outdoors. Take a hike and look at the wonders of nature. Rocks, insects, and plants bring the outdoors to life. Take it all in, be mindful. You can bike, canoe, kayak, or take motorized transportation, such as a motorboat, jet ski, or car. If you can, leave your phone at home. The world slows down for you when you spend time in nature. Focus what's right in front of you. Focus on what is right in front of you. Once you get really good at it, you will be in no rush to get to the next place or activity. So that's an exercise, a focus that you can do. And then in my workbook that is still being written, I have timelines for individuals, suggested amounts, periods of time that you could spend in each chapter. That might be just my suggestion on how much time to spend in each chapter, including the take action sections. But I do mention in the workbook that it's really up to the reader to decide how long he or she wants to spend in a section, because some sections you may feel you want to spend longer on than other sections. I am starting, or I have actually put out in page, towards the very end of the book, the epilogue on page 200. I've mentioned that I'm planning to start Zoom classes for individuals who want to go through the book in that manner. And it really, the whole thing with the book is it's really a personal, it's a personal journey, because our life is a personal journey. We're each responsible for our own lives, and it's not helpful when we try to get some outside force to be responsible for us, and then because then we can blame the outside force when something doesn't go the way we want it to go, right? And one of the treatments for mental health is to feel empowered. If you can feel empowered, like you have some degree of control over the outcome of your life, then that can be really helpful to steady your mental health. There are two, and that's really the whole idea behind the book, is to make the individual or the reader take responsibility for his or her own life, however that may work out, and to take ownership of it, and then to feel the value for themselves for doing that. Two of the, and I think the way I simplify my life is I try not to have too many rules, even though I do have 50 rocks and 10 rock categories, but I try not to have too many rules. I try to believe, unless maybe my hamstring starts getting tight, and I think, well, that's not common. Maybe I'm gonna have an injury if I keep going. So then that's a good reason to stop. So I have to decide what a good reason is, right? And each person would have to decide what a good reason is. But that approach, do not quit without a good reason, has caused me not to quit on a bunch of stuff. So that's something, and it's really fulfilling not to quit, to keep going. It's just amazing. It's amazing. It creates a sense of discipline, which is one of the health rocks. Another thing that I believe in is do not quit without a good reason. And another thing I live by is do your best, but do not be a perfectionist. Do your best, but do not be a perfectionist. A perfectionist, if you're a perfectionist, you're trying to do it as well as anybody on the planet Earth can do it. If you're doing your best, you're just doing your best. Doesn't matter what anybody else can do. And on some days, doing your best won't look very good. Because let's say you are triggered, you had an argument with somebody at home, or you're having moderate to severe depression, or you've just come off a panic attack. Well, on those days and in those moments, your best isn't going to look very good by somebody else's standard. But it doesn't really matter what it looks like to them. What matters is how it looks like and feels to you. And if you're putting in your best effort, at the end of the day, you go to bed at night, you put your head in the pillow, and you're like, you know what, I did my best. And I don't know how other people are perceiving it, but I'm proud of myself. I'm proud that I did my best. And that helps me too, because by not being a perfectionist, what happens is, by being a perfectionist, I'm never happy with what I've done, right? And that could really, especially if you have a mental illness to begin with, that could just trigger you right into your symptoms of your mental illness. And also not allow you to move on to the next thing when you've completed what you're doing. Doing my best is, and I love telling people at work, because I do a lot of mental health advocacy at work, and I love telling people, do your best, and just own your decisions. When you make a decision to do something, it could be anything. It could be going to your child's graduation. It could be cleaning the toilet bowl. But if you made a decision to do something, that's an important decision. That's an important event, because you could have decided to do a whole bunch of things, but you made a decision to do one thing. So then own that decision and follow through with what you decided to do. And that also helps you to stay mindful, living in the present without judgment, objectively observing what naturally exists. It helps you stay mindful if you take ownership of what you've decided to do in the present moment, because then you're like, you know what, if somebody tries to pull me off of this, I'm gonna stay here unless I decide to go on to something else. And it's really very empowering. So that's kind of like some of the background of the book. I do have in the back, because my editor has a strong background in publishing and in teaching and representing scholarly books. We were able to put this book together in a way that was more user-friendly to follow. So we do have some footnotes and permissions in here for the other experts and sources that I use. And I have 2 indexes and 1 appendix. An appendix on all of the different categories and specific health rocks and what chapters they appear in the book. For example, pet is in chapters 4 and 14 of part 1. So the appendix is about part 1 of the book, because those specifically the health rocks. And then I have an index of health rocks, which has each term, each health rock, acceptance, for example, is a health rock. It has all the pages in the book that acceptance appears on. And then I have an index of challenges of depression. One of those are mainly the titles of part 2 of the book, like denial, family life, fear, or 3 of them. The one challenge of depression in the index that's not actually its own title of a chapter is the fight or flight response. But it does indicate all the pages in the book that the fight or flight response term appears. Fight or flight response is something that we learned back in the days of the cavemen. Days of the cavemen, if you were a caveman, you lived in a cave and you had a cave woman and you had cave kids. Well, what happens is you had to figure out how to feed your family, right? The caveman had to feed the family. So he had to go out and he had to find food. He had to kill an animal or whatnot. And sometimes he had to avoid animals that were trying to kill him. If the sources of food had been utilized or eaten or killed, that within a certain radius of his cave, let's say a mile in any direction, he had to go further out to get food. Well, if he did not get back in time to feed his family, he would come back to a dead wife and dead kids, right? Because they'd be starved to death. So he had a fight or flight response because he had a real danger, right? What's happened, take today, what happens is people seldomly are we in real danger. I do triathlons, which is there's 3 events: you swim, bike, and run. And on the swimming part of it, you swim in waves of people. So the people sometimes they swim into each other. So I had a guy that swim over me, and it dropped me down, and it's deep enough where you can certainly drown. And they have canoes out there, a couple canoes with people looking, but they're not going to be able to tell everyone who's in trouble. And they even mark your body with ink, so that if you don't show up, they can determine who didn't come out of the water. So that was a real danger, right? Like I could have drowned when I got knocked down further in the water. I could have drowned. That's a real danger, right? We have maybe 5 of those events in our lives, type of thing, right? So, but the way our brains work, we cannot distinguish between a perceived danger, what we think is a danger, and what's a real danger. Our bodies and our minds and our chemicals, they all react the same, whether it's a real danger or a perceived danger. Our bodies and minds don't know the difference. So what happens is it drives us into fight or flight response. Either you're fighting, you're trying to get something that you think you really have to have, or you're fleeing from something that you perceive is trying to get you to do you harm. And when you spend a lot of your life in the fight or flight response, that's why that's a challenge in the book of depression. Then you're using what they call the reptilian brain, and that'll get you when you're in fight or flight a lot. That'll get you to the point where it's a block to mindfulness, and it's gonna more likely put you in depression. So that's the thing, and so the book gets out a lot of ways to address fight or flight response and try to stay in what they call a relaxed alert state. Like the movie Top Gun with Tom Cruise, now the sequel is finally coming out. Well, the Top Gun movie, you had to compete with other fighter jet pilots, and you had to try to be the best. And the ones that are the best, and the best athletes in the world also, are the ones who don't go to fight or flight response, but they get into a relaxed alert state. So you could actually perform better and have a better quality of life if you focus on getting away from the fight or flight response. But the only way you can get away from it is if you have an alternative. If you don't have an alternative, then you only have one way to live, in a sense. So that's where mindfulness, the relaxation response, are two of the health rocks. That's where the book gives you alternatives to fight or flight response. So the last thing I'll mention on the book is that what I did was I put together all of the concepts of the book from things that I know from my areas of expertise, things in my head. So I put the whole book together without doing any research. And then I was working with my professional team that published it with me, and also other professionals that were giving me free advice. Because when I tried to get a book deal, I was dealing with literary agents who would not sign me, but yet some of them were very glad and very gracious to give me advice. And one of the pieces of advice I got from like 3 or 4 of them was that I had to put in information from other experts to support what I'm saying is valid. Because people are skeptical, there's a lot of dishonesty in the world, right? And so then I'm like, well, I hope I can find other stuff. And I found a lot of other stuff. And then I put that stuff in the book, and some of it, like Blaise Pascal, who was an inventor, mathematician in the 16th century or so. I've got a quote from him. And so it's from all different people. I've got stuff on Abraham Lincoln, Winston Churchill, and just modern day psychologists. The Mayo Clinic, which people have heard of. So you learn from me, and you learn from other experts, and we're all saying and supporting each other with these ideas. And some of the concepts will resonate with you more than others. The workbook will certainly help bring it alive when that publishes, and we're making good progress on that. And I'm enjoying. Like, it doesn't really matter how many people I present to. It matters that somebody wants to hear me present. That's what matters to me. So far, actually, the book published last summer, and I have distributed over 500 books. Some of them I'm really glad to say I gave away, quite a few, and quite a few people paid me some money for. And I'm just starting now to have conversations with institutions to collaborate. A lot of that will be more substantive once the workbook gets published, because then you have something that you could really put in front of a group along with the book. So I'm going to wrap up there. I want to thank Cynthia for having me here at the library.
Thank you very much for coming.
You're welcome. Where I grew up, the town I grew up in, and Johanna, and Angela. I want to thank you for coming to the class, and more to come. And thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just had a question for you
Yeah.
about the health rocks. Would you say there could be other things besides the ones that you came up with?
Yeah.
Or is it like how did you come up with a definitive list, and can there be more, or?
Yeah, the list I came up with was based upon the qualities of a health rock, like it helps you be vulnerable, it's reliable. So I have the 7 or so bullets that like a pet does that, right?
Oh,
Right,
yeah, yeah.
so it had to meet, for me to call something a health rock, it had to meet those 7, it had to meet all 7, not just some of the 7 qualities that I mentioned.
Okay.
But I do say, like, at the end of the workbook, I put a summary section, and it's like for people to learn more and to take it further beyond. And then I even say, come up with your own health rocks. Think about, considering what the attribute of a health rock is, come up with your own health rocks. And there absolutely are going to be more than the 50 I came up with.
Yeah.
And that's, so that's the thing, right? Because there definitely will be more than 50.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, oh yeah. You're welcome.
Thank
Are
you
we-
very much.
Did the Facebook show?
Yep.
Is that,
I'm gonna just.
how does that work? You have to stop or something?